Hi, folks. I'm Geek here. Unfortunately, we don't have any audio in here until about the 17-minute, 50-second mark. Sorry for the inconvenience.
some of our users who clicked on really stupid stuff, as part of camaraderie. But really, at the end of the day, my message to my staff is, you got to pick up their slack. Even though they're a bunch of, idiots, you got to pick up their slack, right? And that's really important. Ways that we pick up their slack is that if you come to one of my security awareness trainings, and somebody on your team misses that meeting, they're on vacation, they're sick, they didn't show up, and their boss is going to do it, then we sit down as pretend y'all are your employees at the company. We'll sit down, come up with the phishing, and then we'll attack the people that didn't show up to the meeting, right? It gives them buy-in. They think it's kind of fun, and they pay attention a little bit better. It kind of gamifies it a little bit for them as well. Makes it interesting. They get to see, I demonstrated how to social engineer somebody, how to go find all their information on the internet, and then make a phone call to try and get some of that stuff out. Doing whatever you can to raise that level of engagement, making it interesting, is good, but just know it's never going to get you 100%. You gotta really focus on what can you do after they've clicked. How can you find out after they clicked? So pay attention to that one. It's important. All right, so you're in the middle of an engagement, or you're actually being targeted by somebody. First thing that we've found after phishing is your external services. Do they have two-factor? Because if they get credentials, boom. We've had red team engagements where they got credentials, they enabled EAS on a device, and now they're acting as that employee, sending emails as that employee. The best one that we had was they actually got into IT's email address, they're like the distribution list, and we're sending emails to employee, hey, click on this link, I need you to check this out, can you see what this is doing? And that's how they did it. It was awesome. And they did it remotely. They never touched foot, never came in our offices. They all did it through OWA and EAS. The cool thing is that I told my CEO and my vice president about this, and they were like, well, let's get rid of OWA. And I'm like, really? You just want me to get rid of it? And they're like, yeah, get rid of it. I'm like, not what I was expecting, but okay. So much to the rest of the company's, dismay, and mine as well. I really didn't expect it. They were like, yeah, just get rid of OWA. If it's invulnerable, then yeah, go for it. I'm like, I think there's some things we can do, but you're the boss. So, okay. VPN, same thing. Look at your stuff, your web apps, your portals, your whatever they are. Do they have two-factor authentication? Whether it's, I guarantee you the red team's going to phish, and they're going to use that right off the bat. That's like the guys you've been hearing from today. That's the fastest way to try and gain entry. So be prepared. There's a lot of debate. Security people, I love them. They can agree with you, and then they'll argue to death about something that's, I feel like, hey, I think we're saying something similar. The implementation might be different. There's been a lot of debate, a lot of criticism about SMS text messages as being a second factor or multi-factor, whatever you want to call it. And I've heard great arguments for, pro, whatever. My thought on it is, if you put something in there like that, yeah, can it be bypassed? Can somebody figure out a way to spoof something and get that code back or phish the user for the code? Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? There's a good chance that you're probably going to run into somebody who didn't do that. It gives you another opportunity to detect the red team's presence, somebody to report and go, hey, I didn't reset my password, and I got this SMS text and then another text saying to send me it just creates that opportunity of you walking down the hall, you're seeing a creepy old dude tying his shoe, and somebody's saying something. And that's really, again, back to that detection, right? The things that we've focused on have been very much detection as well as prevention, but detection is the heart of it. So if you can do anything, SMS, text, or even just an email with a code, it's better than nothing, trust me. Number two, so beyond phishing, let's say that they actually get on a machine, and a lot of times in some of our smaller Tiger Team engagements, I straight up give the red team one of my laptops, and I'm like, hey, here's one of our laptops, go to town. So they can go sit out in the parking lot, connect to our Wi-Fi, do all that fun stuff, and my team's job to figure out something odd is not happening right. So anyway, real quickly, they're going to start running PowerShell. right off the bat. I mean, well, good ones will. I mean, maybe you get somebody who's like me, still holding on to the VB days, you know. I'm like, oh man, 2001, this VB is awesome. But, you know, my admins can do amazing things with PowerShell that would take me like 50 lines of code to do what one line of code does in PowerShell. Do you guys control that? In our environment, yours might be different. There's zero reason why my users need to be running PowerShell. Zero. So they can't. We disabled it. Application whitelisting, yeah, I know there's ways to bypass it. Again, security people splitting hairs on stuff. Having it there is better than not having it there, and it gives you that opportunity to detect something. I don't know how many times we've brought in a new red team company, and we said, oh yeah, just see what you can do, and they phish a user, boom, we get an alert because they tried to, malware tried to execute on that machine, and our application whitelisting caught it, right? We blocked it. That is important in our environment. I'm telling you, I don't know how many times we've caught malicious stuff just with PowerShell and application whitelisting. There's really no reason why your users need to be. And you know what? Sometimes I don't think my devs should be running PowerShell either, but, we figured out a way to let them do that. So, any questions about that right there? There are ways. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, it's slightly tangential, but are you talking about Unix Linux systems as well?
No, I'm sorry, I will not be. This is mostly Windows-based. I apologize for not including all that stuff. Sorry. The reason why a lot of this is tailored to Windows environment and not Linux, Unix is typically because where we find the most activity, the most opportunity for us to detect is at the desktop where the end users are, and most of them aren't using Linux, or actually none of ours are, but I apologize for that. I will say, though, that there are opportunities for you to implement some of this stuff even in a mixed environment like that. So, for what it's worth. Right off the bat, after they gain access to something, they're going to try some of this stuff. I don't know if you guys know what Responder is or have played with Responder. I wish that the good guys had a tool that was as easy as to use as Responder, that was as effective at doing the things that Responder does. But literally, a dummy can go on YouTube, watch a 5-minute video. While they're watching that 5-minute video, download Kali. It already has Responder on it, and then they can start attacking your network in 5 minutes. A dummy can. You can go teach your secretary, the executive assistant, how to scrape credentials using Responder in very, very short amount of time. It's a super effective tool, and it's very easy to, deter. Sometimes I hear people talk about, we can't disable NetBIOS because we have legacy system, or another one is SMB signing. They'll be like, oh, I can't do that because I got to support Linux or Unix or whatever. Can you disable it somewhere? I mean, maybe you have 10 users that are using some Linux system, or you have, accounting that's using a really old, mainframe that you got to have NetBIOS running on or something. I don't know. But does the rest of your organization need to have NetBIOS running? If not, disable it from them, because at least you'll have something protected, right? Because this stuff is really quick and easy scary. I mean, like I said, it's really effective. I said it right there. So trivial. You can just get credentials. And we've been burned by this one time. We had Red Team. They had given them a laptop. They were on our network. Actually, I think they had a little Dropbox I plugged in for them. Anyway, about 4 hours into the engagement, the guy calls me up and says, "Hey, just want you to know we're going to continue on with the engagement. We still have 70-something hours left, but we've already escalated to domain administrator." And I'm like, that's pretty awesome. How'd you do that? And they're like, well, you have an admin that's running. He's logged in as a domain admin on this server, and WPAD, and I got the credentials. And I'm like, interesting. Okay, all right, thanks. And really, we're like 4 hours into it. I hadn't even had a second cup of coffee yet. It's terrible. This is another really big one for us. I love it. This is my favorite one when we have a new pen test company come in, because they try and move laterally, and I catch them right off the bat, right? A lot of people disable Windows Firewall inside the network, right? Because it's a pain, and you're inside the network. It's trusted. But we don't. We enable it, and we block everything that we don't need running off that machine. So if one of my machines tries to ping another machine, I get an alert on it. And I get to see where they were trying to ping, what they were doing. And it's really awesome when red team or pen tester comes in and they try and port scan something, or they just even try and SSH to a switch or something. That, it's really awesome, because then I can, call up the guy and say, hey, I got you. You tried to do this. Please put that in your report so I can give it to my VP and get a raise. But it's really effective, because my users, like PowerShell, they don't need to be pinging anything. You're an accountant. Why are you pinging something? Right? And it really freaks them out when you walk up to somebody and say, hey, 22-year-old intern, what were you pinging this for? And they're like, well, I'm sorry. Am I going to lose my job? Don't tell my dad. And I'm like, yeah, listen, don't do that anymore. Okay? But it's really effective at identifying things that aren't happening. Again, it goes back to that detection. You got to be able to detect quickly things that are abnormal. And these are one of the things that we use, and it catches them really quickly. It's awesome. Consequently, I should mention that typically we will do an entire year with one company. And my instructions to them is that you learn from the last time you were here, so that it gets harder for us to detect you, so that you don't waltz in and just, blast everything, or you don't run some PowerShell code and I catch you like that. That way they know what I have in place, and it makes it harder for them. They have to be more quiet, which makes it harder for my staff to detect them, right? So I should mention that. Every time the red team comes in, they don't just do things and I catch them right off the bat. I try and make it really hard. Another really big one for us, we've had some fun with this one, but we have several different admin accounts. If you're our senior systems admin, he's going to have at least 3 admin accounts, right? He's going to have a local admin account. He's going to have what we call a network admin or a machine admin in some cases, where he can get onto servers like the print server and clear a queue or something stupid, or install something. And then there's the domain admin, right? And we're really careful to only use the domain admin for domain work, right? There's no reason why you need to log into a user's machine to install a printer as the domain admin. But yet that happens a lot. I know of a company, they got a couple of thousand machines, and there are CIOs running a domain admin as his regular account, right? That kind of stuff happens out there. But it's been really effective for us because, like I told you with the WPAD thing, when my sysadmin logs into a machine and he's using non-domain credentials, so an attacker gets those credentials, it's limited the scope a little bit, and it allows us to detect if they try and do something thinking they're a domain admin, or trying to pivot around thinking that admin account might have keys to other servers. So keep that in mind. Figure out what levels of account admin separation. There's really no reason why service accounts should ever be a domain admin, right? I mean, if you do have service accounts domain admin, you probably need to really examine if they actually need it. I know that support told you, I tell this to my admins all the time, I know the support told you to add domain admin, but no, we're not doing that. Find a way to get it to work, otherwise, we're ditching the product, right? Keep that in mind. Any questions about that? Yeah. Yeah, interactive service login. I kind of put that in there in the last slide, but in our environment, if you create a service account, in Active Directory you have the little log on to button you can click, and it gives you a list of servers that account can only log into. If you create a service account in my environment, you have to fill that out. You can't have a service account that can log into multiple servers that it doesn't need. Whether that's interactive login and all that stuff, we limit that down as well. So yeah, if your service account, all service accounts don't need interactive login, disable that for them. And make it even worse. Take that service account and if it's only for the print server, then put in that login tab, the print server, and that's it, right? I mean, you have to put the domain admin, or the domain controllers in there too so it can authenticate. But, trim that list down so that if they do get that credential, all they can do is attack your print server. They can't attack other file servers or where maybe your confidential information is stored. It's a good point. Thank you. On that, I'll tell you that one time we had the red team, and at this point in time, we were getting fairly good at detecting stuff, and we'd locked down a lot. And so we get in about 10 hours into the engagement, and the only thing that they had been able to do, and we had already been tipped off to their activity, so we're tailing them pretty hard. And we see that they're messing with one of our printers, like a big, huge Xerox multifunction something color cube big printer, right? And we're like, I don't know what they're doing to that thing. I mean, and there's not a lot we can do anyway because Xerox and we can't really patch it as fast as we want to. And then all of a sudden they stop messing with it, and so we're kind of like, I don't know what's going on. Then we start seeing them logging, trying to enumerate all the they didn't try, they did enumerate all of the user accounts from our Active Directory. And we're like, that's really strange. I don't know what that was about. And the next thing you know, I get a call from one of my administrators who said, "Hey, there's an account that just got created on our network." And I was like, "What? How did they do that?" So, turns out we had just done a domain upgrade from I think 2012, maybe 2016 or something like that. I don't remember. I guess it was 2008 to 2012 is when we did the upgrade. And in the process, somehow, I don't know if it was by default or somebody just screwed up on my end. I never figured that out. The join a computer to the network, you know how you can do that by default, like each account can join a computer to the network, to the domain, like 10 times. Well, they had gotten onto the printer, they logged in, and gotten the address book lookup account, service account. Used that to enumerate all of the accounts on our Active Directory, which was pretty awesome. I was like, man, that's cool. I would never even thought to attack a printer to get that. Once they had an account, all the list of accounts, they went through all the accounts and they found one that was like test user accounting 1, right? And then they sprayed the password. Turns out it was password 1, right? And because we had just done that upgrade, they used that account to then join a VM that they were running to our domain and had administrative privileges on that machine, that VM that they created. So it was pretty awesome. I mean, honestly, it was a really cool little pathway that they got, to create a machine on my network. And of course, because they had a list, they knew how to do the convention so that it looked legitimately and not like desktop VM 7895. But anyway, it's a good example of where limiting those accounts to only log in on what they need to be able to log in would have been able to help us out a little bit. To go back a little bit, that test user account, one of our devs, I love dev people, but one of our devs had created it to do some testing with on our intranet. And so using that account, they also were able to, go into the accounting, because it was an accounting, and take out some personal information as well. So good red team win there. It was pretty awesome too, because we were starting to get a little cocky at that point. We're feeling pretty confident. Physical security. If you have a physical component to your red team, which, like I said, we do not always, they tend to ramp the cost up quite a bit, and generally are a lot more difficult to, correct. But one of them is the port security. Being able to detect whether it's a red team or the secretary's son computer plugging into our network is pretty important. Because the secretary's son, who's a 12-year-old and he's doing terrible things on his computer in his room while his mom's not there, and it comes onto our network because she needs to try and fix it, and the internet's not working at their house, so she plugs it into our network, and boom, can I detect that quickly? Because I don't want that machine on there. And the red team, if you have a physical component, they will do the same thing. Whether it's a wireless AP like we've seen, whether it's a Dropbox that's going to phone home, or whether it's an actual laptop that they're just sitting there interacting with. You need to be able to do that. Vendors, we've caught vendors. I've walked into conference rooms before, and I said, hey, sir, do you mind unplugging your machine from my network? Not only does it make your staff realize that, oh, okay, they're serious about this. It also reminds the vendor that you can't do that. It embarrasses them quite a bit. So far, I haven't been pushed back on that, but it's important. Those are things that you really, got to be able to identify that stuff quickly. Okay, so here's some of the notables. I talk about these because they've been important to us, but they've not necessarily saved us in the long run. With the exception of the outbound port blocking, we have actually caught malware because it was trying to send stuff on ports that were not allowed. But we all know that you can just put it on port 80 and put whatever you want in it anyway, and it'll still go out because we allow port 80. I'm sure you guys do too. And in reality, it's a SSH session, and you're like, oh, well, damn, that was not fun. Microsoft ATA. I really hope Microsoft, and by the way, I'm not pushing Microsoft stuff, but this product, it's kind of interesting, and I throw it out there just as something to just be aware of, because I really hope Microsoft invests a lot in it and makes it more robust and better. But it's really cool, because if you run, what is it, enum4? I don't know how you pronounce that, because I'm not really cool. But if you go and you try and enumerate a list of accounts off the Active Directory, Microsoft ATA will alert you to that. The other really cool thing is so we schedule restarts after patches in bulk, right? So these servers are going to restart because they just got patches. It's really neat because that only happens every once in a while. I mean, it's not like a daily occurrence. And Microsoft ATA will, it'll alert us to say, hey, this admin account just told all these servers to reboot, or just logged into all these servers. So it's pretty interesting. Like I said, I'm not pushing it. It's not something that's really saved us a lot, but it's been kind of neat to watch. Certificate-based authentication, Wi-Fi authentication, been important to us. Red Team has tried very hard to get onto our website, our guest Wi-Fi and our corporate Wi-Fi, and having that certificate-based authentication, something other than the passphrase, has been useful. Before we had that, Red Team was able to figure out a way to get onto that network. And generally it was done by social engineering or by, getting it off of the user's machine, piggybacking off that machine somehow. I don't remember exactly. But once we got that certificate based on there, it really helped us out not having that password anymore. I talked about port blocking, and then the service account control we've already kind of hit on. That logon tab, time of day usage, that kind of stuff, it's built into there, but nobody really uses it, or at least doesn't use it very often. We found that to be tremendously helpful. If we know backup jobs are only going to run between, midnight and 6 a.m., that service account doesn't need to be logging in at 2 p.m. It just doesn't. And so we use that. Keep that stuff in mind. Like I said, none of what we talked about is going to save you at the end of the day. It's really about detection response. And a lot of these things that what I've talked about here, we have seen and really rely on as really good indicators. I hate trying to use the jargon, but, really good ways to detect things that aren't normal. It's still your job to respond to it adequately and figure out, is it just an anomaly, or is this actually malicious? Anyway, that's kind of what I got. The worst thing than no security is poorly adopted security. We've all done things where people try and get around it, right? We put in YouTube blocking, and people figured out that their laptops could connect to the guest Wi-Fi, so guess what they did? They undocked, they connect their laptop to the guest Wi-Fi, and next thing you know, they're on the actual open internet, not as protected inside the corporate. There's some things that we've done about that. But my point of it is as you are going through your security program, really think about how it impacts the user and if they're going to try and get around it. And if they do, can you detect that? Can you prevent that? All of those things matter. Red Team's going to come in and do it. The best Red Teamers, the best pen testers are the best system admins out there. If you want to be a really good sysadmin, you could probably be a really good pen tester. Any questions? Comments? Yes, sir.
So, with respect to a lot of workstations,
Yeah.
From my perspective, how much noise are you going to generate when you start implementing controls that are going to be basically
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's not something we have the ability to just implement across the board with everything they can adopt.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, as far as bank your buck is concerned, you say it's a single other thing you do have a single person. Least impact that end users versus like gradually.
Well, I will say, and this is probably true of anything that you do in life, planning and preparation goes a long way. So the question was, is there any one big bang for the buck? Because turning some of these things on, just turning them on, it's going to create a lot of false positives. It's going to create a lot of mayhem for users, and that's absolutely true. Application. If I were to say any one thing, application whitelisting and PowerShell are probably the biggest at preventing and detecting that we see, and that goes with malware. That goes with red team or my own users trying to do stuff. But it goes back to the preparation and planning. When we first initially started rolling out application whitelisting, of course we do our due diligence, figure out what needs to run, what's running on our user's machine. We already had it pretty tightly locked down as far as our software inventory goes. So we knew it was out there. But what we weren't prepared for was applications that behave badly. Was shocked how many applications run stuff from the app data. I mean, it's literally an executable in the user app data folder that it's calling to run. That's terrible. That's a terrible approach. So I call up several vendors and pretty much gave them an earful. Hey, this is dumb. I mean, this is really bad practice. Really bad practice. You do have to do a lot of pass application whitelisting, and so you have to be aware of those things. So really, if you're trying to implement any control that's both preventative and detective, you be prepared to spend a lot of time planning it and thinking it through, testing it, and then rolling it out, and ready for kind of some, I don't want to say pushback, but to address those things that will come up. Port blocking was easy for us. We hopped on, just look at traffic. Like I said, we pretty tight controls on software, so wasn't a lot that we were expecting to see, and in the end of it, there really wasn't a lot. Well, there's a lot. I'll tell you, how many of y'all are in really big environments, like 1,000 machines or more? I mean, that's not really big, but let's just start at 1,000. Okay, so the bigger your environment, the more you're going to have to rely on third-party products. But if you're on a small environment, I mean, a couple hundred people, that's easy to do. You can write some PowerShell script. You can go get MAC addresses. You can get it out of your DHCP server, and you throw those in a list on your switch, and then you get an alert when something tries to connect on that. It is vulnerable to spoofing. There are things, but again, somebody comes into your environment, they're not expecting that. They get on your network, and boom, you get an alert right there. Again, a lot of this stuff, there's ways around it. But that's one way to do it. I'm trying not to mention vendors specifically in this talk, because I really, really feel like a lot of people could benefit from moving away from, we need to go get a product to do this, and really thinking through, how can we do this effectively? Because in some cases, you need a product. In some cases, you just need some planning and, maybe a couple of lines of PowerShell. Yeah, so everybody gets to that point where you're like, oh, geez, these alerts are killing me. Outbound port blocking is probably a great example of that, because there's always some application that you really can't turn off whatever it's trying to phone home to or do. And so what I would say in that respect is that, one of the things that we've learned is things that we thought were important to us through all these red teamings and all this practicing, ended up not being important to us at all. Getting alerted on outbound port blocking for the ephemeral range matters zero to us, right? In most cases. But if we see something on port 21, 22, 25, red flags fly up. The other thing is narrowing it down to a specific scope. For instance, some of my servers try and phone home on that stuff. We don't care about that as much as the endpoints, because we know the endpoints are more vulnerable since we don't control the person using it. So if an end user's computer does an outbound port, some kind of port that gets blocked, we want to know about that more than we do, our WSUS server or whatever. So that's kind of how we handle it. It really is a risk management process of looking what's effective and what's not. And in some cases, you find out a little bit down the road that, yeah, this alert was good in theory, but damn, we get a lot of false positives, and it's really useless to us. So we trim those things down. Yes, sir.
How much time do you recommend people use before you implement something with infrastructure? For example, something like say DLP. The moment you tell your user you're going to implement DLP, the person is still gets back and up to USB device. It's quicker than effective lights.
Yep.
There's a trade-off. How do you do it?
Well, typically, the planning and preparation, you're going to start communicating with those users early. Hey, this is coming. This is going to affect you. You're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to do that. In a lot of cases, your relationship with those employees matters there as well, because if you have a group of employees that you can say, hey, we're thinking about doing this, how's that gonna impact you? You get to hear their perspective, and that might make a difference. For instance, two-factor authentication at the desktop, something that we're pursuing. We've implemented it at our privileged accounts. So our domain admins, all of our admins are two-factor at the desktop, interactive sessions. But when we get down to the users side, they're like, man, I don't have to type in almost an effing pin every single time. And so you're like, okay, that's a good point. That's a pain in the butt. I hate doing that too. So you're like, well, maybe I could just plug something into the machine. Then you get to worrying about, and you're like, well, what if they leave it in there, right? And they just throw it in their bag, and the USB key's in the machine, right? And it's ineffective at that point. Our idea was, we'll integrate it into a smart card that's also a prox card that's their badge. So now they can't leave the building unless they take it out of their laptop, even to go to the bathroom, right? And so what I would say to that is really have a dialogue with them. Start talking with them. How's that going to affect you? Start trying to think, how would that affect you? I mean, you're a systems admin. You can, navigate your way, but is it a pain in the butt? Am I done? 1 minute? So it's really, like I said, I can't tell you enough. Most of what I've found to be really effective is planning and preparation. Reading the white papers on how a product's going to work. Talking with people, who you might think is an idiot. But they're going to try and get around your stuff anyway. Or they're going to complain to management, and the management's going to pull the plug. So that's how I would handle it. Honestly, that's how I would handle it. It's not sexy. It's not fun. It goes back to that ISC squared stuff. Question? Nope. Scratching? Anything else? Alrighty, guys. Thank you very much. If you want to chat, like I said, I could talk about this for 6 hours. So.